I'm going to talk to you today about microphones, particularly condenser mics versus dynamic mics, and I'm going to explain what they are and what their uses are. Most mics you come across in general use, particularly at gigs, are dynamic mics. Dynamic mics are the workhorses of the microphone world. So what's the difference between a dynamic and a condenser mic? Well, I'd liken a condenser mic to a Hoover. It literally sucks up the sound. They're that much more sensitive than dynamics are. They give a more detailed sound, and the top end, the treble, is so much better, and they're particularly good for recording acoustic instruments. Another thing is the price. Most dynamics don't go to above £300, whereas condensers can go up to £10,000, especially valve mics. Any sound you record will sound great through a condenser mic. So if you need detail for an instrument you're trying to record, if there's subtle volume changes, or if there's a lot of harmonics or a lot of top end and treble, then it'll sound so much more lush and realistic with a condenser mic. Whereas with a dynamic, they work better with middle frequencies, instruments without high top end frequencies. All condenser mics are powered by something called 48 volts phantom power, which is sent down the microphone lead to power the mic. There are some cheaper condenser mics that take batteries, such as the AKG C1000, which is about £120. These are not to be confused with the battery-powered electret mic, which are found in things like Maplin's electronics catalogue for about 50 quid. But these are not for professional use, although you can get expensive electret microphones. When it comes to recording, you'll find the whole recording industry uses certain bits of equipment for certain jobs. Bits of equipment become industry standards. So microphones are no different. There are certain mics that everybody uses for certain jobs. Of course, you can experiment, but as far as people on a budget go, you need to know the bit of equipment you're going to buy is going to do the job you want it to do. So I tend to go for industry standard bits of equipment because you know they work. They're tried and tested. I'm going to give you a list of instruments and what mics are commonly used to record them so you can understand their use a bit better. So condenser mics are very good for acoustics. So acoustic, guitar, violin, hi-hat, cymbals, vocals, any classical instrument. A condenser mic could be used for absolutely anything. Dynamic mics do sound better for certain jobs, such as kicks, snares, toms, electric guitar cabs, bass guitar cabs, saxophones can be condenser or dynamic. Rock vocals also sound good with dynamic mics. Both mics are equally at home with loud volumes, so they can both handle the same sound pressure levels. Most expensive condenser mics, you can adjust the polar pattern. The polar pattern determines where the sound's picked up on the microphone. Is it from the front? Is it on the back? Is it narrow? Is it wide? Now, there's 4 common polar patterns that can be selected. The first is a cardioid, which is like a heart-shaped pickup pattern. In fact, on most dynamics, you'll find they're cardioids. If it doesn't say what it is, it'll be a cardioid. Then the next is a hyper-cardioid, which is like a narrow band cardioid. When you're trying to minimise spillage, for instance, a hi-hat or cymbals, you might want to spot mic something. Well, that prevents spillage. There's an Omni, which means that it picks up 360 degrees round the microphone. For instance, you might use it for capturing the ambience in a room micing. And finally, there's a figure of 8, which picks up from the front of the mic and the back of the mic only. So say there's 2 vocalists, you're trying to do backing vocals. You stand a vocalist either side of the mic and they can sing together. It still only records it to one channel, but that's what figure of 8 means, the front and the back together. When it comes to recommendations of mics, I'm going to give you a budget, a mid and an expensive. Let's start with condensers first. So a budget condenser. There's an AKG C3000 that's 150. A mid-price would be an AKG C414. These are about 750. Or a top end would be something like a Nyman U87, which is probably the most famous studio microphone. It really is the industry standard microphone. It can be used for all jobs. Nymans also make mics up to £5,000 plus, including valve mics that can be even more expensive. Let's take a look at some dynamic mics now. When it comes to dynamics, you can just get away with short SM57s and 58s. They've been the standard dynamic mic now for 40 or 50 years. They're very good all-rounders, and they retail for about £90. As far as recording the guitar goes, you really can't beat a 57 and a 58 short. They're just great in front of guitar cabs. They really can't be bettered. Short also made an improvement on the 57 and 58 called the Beta 57 and the Beta 58. These are about £50 more. Instead of £90, they're about £140, but they've got much better upper mids and top end, and they do sound significantly better than the original. A mid-priced dynamic mic that's become the industry standard tom mic is a Sennheiser HD421. These are also good for sax or vocals. These are about £300. And a top-end dynamic mic would be something like the Electrovoice RE20, which is used for kick drums, floor toms, and they're also used by radio broadcasters for voice. And the RE20 retails for about $550. As I've explained, there are some specialist dynamic microphones. Another of these would be a dedicated kick drum mic, such as the AKG D112, which is the industry standard kick mic. They did make an older model called the D12, but you can only buy them second hand now. I prefer the sound of the D112 because it had more treble. So you got that clicky bass drum sound in the 80s and 90s. And these cost about £130. Someone asked me to comment the other day about USB microphones, and they did say they weren't very good. Well, I've not actually bought one myself, but they sound good in theory, but I don't know. Simply because mics go into preamps and a USB mic just goes straight into the computer. Well, you can pay £1,000 for a mic preamp. It really does add a lot of colour to the sound. And another thing is, I was saying about industry standards. If USB mics were that good, all the studios would be selling off their condensers and their valve mics. From my experience, new equipment takes 10 or 20 years to get right. For instance, take digital guitar amps, for example. They've been around for 15 or 20 years, but they're only just starting to get good now. New technology always takes a while to sound good. It was exactly the same with plugins. They're just starting to sound good now. So I think hang fire with USB mics and go with something that industry standard that you know is going to work. Well, that just about wraps it up. I've taken you through some mics and I've explained their uses, and I've even given you some recommendations of microphones to buy. So I hope that you find this useful, and I'll see you very soon. See you later. Cheers.